8A and B, introduction to the public hearing on the City of Lake Worth fiscal year 2014-15 adjusted tentative budget. The City of Lake Worth City Commission hereby convenes the public hearing on the City of Lake Worth fiscal year 2014-15 proposed millage rates and adjusted tentative budget as required by Florida statutes chapter 166 and 200 and as advertised in the trim notices. If anyone in our audience is here for the purpose of contesting their property value assessment, a petition for adjustment with the Value Adjustment Board should be filed by September 15, 2014. This information was included in the trim notices. Petition forms are available in the property appraiser's office. This evening we will take a number of actions related to the adoption of proposed millage rates and budgets. The final public hearing on these matters will be held on Tuesday, September 23rd, 2014 at 6 p.m. in this same location, City of Lake Worth City Hall Commission Chambers. I urge you, if you have not already done so, get a copy of the agenda so you may easily follow the proceedings this evening. Citizen comments will be taken following the overview of the adjusted tentative budget by the City Manager and Finance Department. The City Attorney will now present an overview of the truth in millage legislation, followed by the City Manager's explanation of the proposed and rolled back millage rates.
Thank you. So the trim process, truth in millage. In 1980, the Florida legislature adopted what the law is called truth in millage, or trim. The goal was to ensure that taxpayers were advised of public hearings in which the local taxing authorities' budgets and millage rates are considered and adopted. Each year, the property appraiser completes an assessment of the value of all the property and certifies to each taxing authority the taxable value of the property within its jurisdiction. So for Lake Worth, all the property within the City of Lake Worth. Each taxing authority then notifies the property appraiser of its proposed millage rate, its rollback rate, and the date, time, and place of the public hearing to consider the proposed millage rate and the adjusted tentative budget. Once the property appraiser receives this information, he sends a notice by first class mail to every taxpayer on the assessment roll. The notice contains the information from the taxing authorities as to the proposed millage rate and the time and place of the public hearing. That's tonight. The notice was sent to the taxpayers is called the trim notice. The trim notice lists what the taxes were for the previous year, what the taxes will be if the proposed budget changes are made, and what the taxes will be if no budget changes are made. This information is listed for each taxing authority. The notice also lists all voted levies for debt service. The purpose of the trim notice is to provide taxpayers with sufficient basic information to enable them to participate in the public hearing process. And I think the manager is going to explain the city's proposed and rollback millage rates.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney. One of the requirements of the truth in millage legislation is to provide information about why proposed millage rates could be higher than the rolled back millage rates. The proposed tentative millage adopted by the city in July for trim purposes is 5.4945 mils, which is a 9.459% increase over the rollback rate of 5.0197. The millage proposed tonight to fund the FY 2014-2015 budget is the same as last year at 5.4945 mils. The current year proposed aggregate millage rate will generate approximately $540,578 more than the aggregate rollback millage rate would have. The Assistant Finance Director, Barb Hiller, will now present an overview of the adjusted tentative budget for the fiscal year.
Good evening, Commission, Madam Mayor.
And if I could,
We have to do this legally in order the way in which it does. She's going to read this part and then we can ask questions.
well, I think a lot of people don't know what a rollback rate is, and we keep referring to it, and I think we ought to at least define it. So
we're in the middle of the legal process. Let's finish the wording.
I'll address that after her.
Thank you.
Good evening. The total city adjusted tentative budget for the fiscal year 2014-15 is $167,230,535. The fiscal year 14-15 tentative budget was included in your supplemental agenda packages. We currently have on the screen a presentation that we have reviewed with you in past workshops that we will go over with you tonight. the citywide budget overview for the general fund. The proposed budget is using $264,544 the fund balance, which leaves a remaining fund balance in the general fund of approximately $3.5 million. As stated, the property tax rate will remain the same as for the past 3 years at 5.4945 mils. There is, in the proposed budget, a net reduction of 1 position in the general fund, but a continuation of all the current services. In our utilities, the electric rates as instructed have been reduced by 0.5% over last year, which is a total of a 10.5% reduction since 2012. This is in line with our rate parity report card, and the residents' rates are within 6.7% of the FPL rate. And to be noted that the reliability indices have improved over this time frame. Our water and sewer utility rates, the water rates will rise 5% as previously projected and discussed for capital projects and costs for replacement wells. The sewer rates will be rising 8%, mainly due to the increased costs from the East Central Regional Water Treatment Facility, where the city pumps its sewage for treatment. In both the refuse and stormwater collection areas, there will be no rate changes, as it has been the case since 2009. Our parking rates will remain the same at $2 as they have been since 2011. The next few slides, you will see an overall view of all the fund summaries. Our revenues across the city are proposed at $139,110,289, which you can see on the last bottom line in the third column from the right. As the citywide expenditures, this is a presentation by fund type, and our proposed budget shows expenditures of $167,230,535. Again, it's in the bottom third column from the right, is the detail by fund type. As we've discussed before, here is a summary of the general fund revenues by category, by type, with a total of approximately $30 million estimated to come into the general fund. You will see on this next slide through the pie charts a little bit of changes that have happened. Just to note of the positive movement of our percentages, our ad valorem, our federal, state, and local shares, and the local generated revenues have all increased over the last 3 years, as our enterprise contributions have decreased. Our expenditures projected for the general fund for the upcoming fiscal year are $30,324,000 approximately. And in the pie charts here, you will see the percentage of changes, which are moving in. The personnel costs have increased, but those have mainly been due to our healthcare costs and our pension costs, as we have discussed in several of our workshops. Here's a shows you the revenues versus expenditures over the last 10 years. And I believe, as we pointed out before, since fiscal year 2010, we have been pretty much running revenues equals expenditures. So basically, we've been living within our means for these last few years. This is the pension plan required contributions that has been provided by our actuary. We have discussed this through the workshops. Be happy to entertain any questions on this, but it pretty much stays, as you can see, consistent up through 2036, when there will be a drop, because that's the anticipated, basically, the funding of our liabilities of the current plan. We had put this together just to show the use of the fund balance in the general fund. This is how it has decreased over the years so that we can leave more there for unforeseen occurrences. And here's our schedule that we've looked at, controllable versus non-controllable costs. And again, this is just of the general fund, where we have pointed out some of the non-controllable costs being some of our contracts with our police services and our pension funds. And then our controllable costs being more of our operating and the difference between the two amounts. Here's a percentage presentation of that chart that you're just looking at of controllable versus non-controllable costs, and how our percentages have changed over the 4 years presented here. And that was a brief overview of some of the highlights that are being proposed in the 15 budget. Madam Mayor, that would conclude my comments on the tentative budget and the changes that were made to it, and I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Okay, before I open it up, City Manager,
Yeah, just to that point, you've seen this information before, so I don't want you, it moves kind of quickly, there's a lot of information to digest, but this is what was presented over the last several workshops and culminated in the last workshop that you've seen.
Okay.
Just to clarify to Commissioner McVoy's request, when millage is established in the state, it's required to show and demonstrate to the public, as valuations change within the city, what the millage rate would be from year to year so that you bring in the same dollar amount. And that's what Truth in Millage is about, showing that because we had a valuation increase this year of over 9% in the taxable value of the property, the millage rate would actually be lower to generate the same dollar amount as it did in the current fiscal year into the next fiscal year, because the pot got bigger. However, we are recommending in this budget to leave the millage rate the same, which is actually an increase over the rollback rate. So the dollar amount would be increasing by over $500,000 into the general fund if we leave the millage rate the same. Truth in Millage requires us to tell everyone that in order to generate the same money as we did last year, the millage rate would actually be at 5.0197. And that's the intent of that law, is to show people that just leaving the millage rate the same generates a different dollar amount. Does that clarify, Commissioner?
Yeah, that's actually very helpful.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'd like to invite citizen comments on the fiscal year proposed millage rates and adjusted tentative budget. If anybody would like to please come forward to the podium if you wish to address the board. We do request each speaker limit their comments to 2 minutes, and the hearing will continue until everyone who wishes to address the commission has an opportunity to do so. Ms. Sharp?
Yes. Loretta Sharp, 1311 South Conway. I don't think that any city took the beating that we did and cut the budget as much as we did. And to roll it back seems a little frivolous to me. I would not be one bit opposed to having a higher millage rate based on what we learned. We learned an increase in values in the city of Lakewood. We laid off how many people? We're providing services without people. And just to roll it back, I'm totally opposed to that. I think you should increase the millage rate. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Okay, I will now close the public comment section of this public hearing. Move to millage rate and budget items on the agenda. We'll need to do this in 2 different motions, and you'll find the motions in your backup material. Commissioner McVoy?
Before we go on to the second part, could I just ask for some clarification back the ways in the presentation?
Sure. What part?
It was the pie charts of the, I think it's that one.
It's revenues by category.
Correct. Revenues by category, sounds like Jeopardy.
I'll take it for
For
5.
yeah, for 500.
So just for anybody listening, they may not be able to see this, but, we won't go into comparing the different years. It changes a little bit, but not drastically. So help me make sure that I understand correctly. Property taxes, the ad valorem taxes, brings in, of the budget of roughly 30 million of the general revenue fund.
5.5.
What's that?
5.5.
Right, quiet the chambers, please. Barbara?
Let's get ad valorem taxes, the property taxes brings in about 6 million. Federal and state and local taxes brings in another, for this year, looks like about 7. So that gets you to a little under half of our budget. It comes from property taxes and federal and local state taxes. And then a bit better than the other half is spread over 3 things, if I'm seeing this right. Enterprise contributions, locally generated revenues, and utility and franchise, I think that says fees, brings in a little bit more than half. Can you, and I know I asked this before, but I seem to have a hard time with the names. Can you just quickly remind us what those 3 categories are? Enterprise contributions, in terms that the average person would understand here in Lakewood.
Certainly do my best.
Which means that maybe I'll get it this time around.
The enterprise contributions are from all of our enterprise funds, meaning basically our utility funds. They are the reimbursement for the administrative costs, the revenue contributions, which is commonly referred to as the old pilot calculation, and actually that's the 2 that make that category up. The locally generated revenues are from fees that we charge for different services, whether it be leisure services or some of like our permitting and such. The utility franchise fees are the fees that the city has enacted through ordinances to charge on various services that are provided to the citizens, whether they're from the city or outside parties.
That last one was the yellow, was the utility franchise funds?
Utilities, utility service tax and franchise fees. Yes.
And
I'm sorry, that would be, I guess, like Comcast cable, various.
The outside services, absolutely.
Just to clarify.
Yes, telecommunications.
so that yellow, that's the utility franchise fees in about 4 million, that doesn't include from our own electric utility, or it does?
It does.
And from the electric utility, about, ballpark, is that about half of that, or a third of it, or
It's about half, 2 million.
So 2 plus 9, roughly. So a bit better than a third of our budget is coming from our own utilities. The enterprise contributions and about 2 million of the yellow of the utility. Is that correct?
Yes.
So I think it's just something that in trying to understand, and I guess I'm thinking aloud a little bit here because I had some questions on it. A resident asked me about it. And I think it's something that we in our community often ask ourselves is, why do we have our own utilities? We have our own water plant, we have our own electric particularly. And I guess it's just worth being aware that having those utilities is pumping a third of our general revenue, which is in fact more than our controllable costs, the things that we actually have some voting influence over. A third of that is coming out of having those utilities. So, whether that's an ideal way to do it, I don't know. There are different views on that, but it's a pretty big chunk of our budget, and we need to be conscious of that. A very positive note is, if I heard correctly, we're quite close to FP&L in terms of our rates of what a kilowatt hour of power costs. We're within about 7%. And despite being pretty close, we are able to pump in some serious revenue into our general revenue fund and keep ourselves going. So that's, you know, we're not that different from FPL, and we're keeping our city going. So it's just something that we want to be aware of.
Just as a clarification, keep in mind the enterprise is not just the electric fund, it's also
Right.
our water, our local sewer, our refuse, and our stormwater funds. So they all contribute in that 9 million.
Is just out of, do you happen to know about what part of the 9 is it roughly half is utilities, or, I mean, is electric, sorry. Yeah, and again, very ballpark.
I would say it's about half is coming from the electric, yes. Just under.
Okay, thank you.
I appreciate your observations, and I agree with the amount of monies and things that are going in there. Something to think about. Years back, I don't know exactly when it was it in the 80s or 70s or whatever, there wasn't money taken from the electric utilities and put into the general fund to run the general fund. And if you look at most other municipalities surrounding us, they operate just fine. They don't own their electric utility, and the money that they make from their enterprise funds is on top of it. It's the gravy that helps them build new buildings and libraries and things of that nature that they have, because it's additional money in. It's not dependent on running it. In fact, at the time, the commission had voted to change some of the operating systems, the way things operated at the utility plant, and it was changed, and that money, the commission at that time then basically allowed the city commission to oversee the budget of the electric utility, and that money started going into the general fund. And I'm sure there's more history than I even know, because I wasn't around that long, but you know, we have to learn to live within our means, and that's one of the reasons why we created that rate parity ordinance, that law that forces us to be at rate parity with FP&L over a couple of years. We're getting closer. At one point when we started this, and I forget, city manager, what was it, like 30, in some cases, in some commercial businesses, we were like 36% different than FP&L, whether it was in the commercial sector.
It was pretty substantial.
It was, you know, in the commercial sector, we were 36% more than FP&L. In other areas, I mean, in some places we saw a 12% drop, now 12.5%. So both the residential and the commercial rates have come down, and we have a law now that forces us to be at that. And I agree that we need the money. God knows we need the money. But again, what we're trying to do is learning how to redo these budgets, and through this budget process, by teaching ourselves and weaning ourselves off of that money to be dependent in the general fund, and living within our means, and learning how to operate within our means, and rebuilding. You know, it's a huge disincentive. How many people know when they talk to friends, neighbors, whatever, forget Lake Worth, don't want to move there, electric rates are too high, electric rates are too high. I mean, everybody knows that. So the only thing that we need to do is we need to remove that disincentive by doing it, but we certainly still need, I mean, first of all, the fact that we're doing it, we're still making money, the enterprise fund's still making money, and we're learning to live with a little bit less, is a good thing. Commissioner McQueen?
Yeah, just a little bit of a follow-up. I think, and I think we've talked about that recently at some meetings, that although what you just said, Mayor, about our perception as a city that everybody says, oh yeah, the Lake Worth, their electric rates are too high, or they're very high, or they're higher than their neighbors. It's true that they're higher than their neighbors, but a 7%,
Oh, I know.
you know, if you use the planning number, which is 1,000 kilowatt hours a month, your bill is about $100 on that order. So 7% says instead of it being $100, it's 107. That's not really a very big disincentive. I don't think there are very many people who are saying, you know what, that $7 just pushed me out of town.
I agree.
We're pretty close. And I think one of the things we've talked about, which I would certainly favor, is let's try to challenge that perception that we're that much more expensive. It's not really a big difference, and if you really want to get into it, our reliability is better than FP&L. And our downtime is shorter, and a bunch of other things we in fact do better. So I think we do want to challenge that.
Come here, let me give you a kiss. I couldn't agree with you more.
Commissioner Maxwell's going to be tough.
No,
Scotty, get in the center.
No, I agree with you exactly what you're saying. I was just saying that to point out at the point, but we've done such good. Had we not created that ordinance, a couple years back, we would be sitting here with 6%. We'd be still, that's what I was trying to say, is that we went from 36% differential to 6.7%. That's huge. We're so close right now.
That's not quite true, because that was 36 in the
categories.
commercial
It
and 7% in the residential, but yeah, we're certainly changing it. The only other thing I would say is that we are not that different from other communities, because I think I'm correct, Barb, that all communities, whether you're on FP&L or other things, charge that utility franchise fee. So whoever is providing power, providing telephones, providing Comcast, providing all those things, any community charges them a fee for doing that in their city, and that comes into the general revenue. So whether it was an outside electric supplier or ourselves, there is that kind of money. The exact amount may differ. It would probably be somewhat less if it was an outside. Yes.
Absolutely, you're correct.
Yeah.
Commissioner Zerdy?
Thank you, Mayor. And kind of related to this is the intention of finding, at one point in time, the property values in our city was almost twice as much as they are right now, back when everything was a little bit crazy, right? So we know that that wasn't going to be something that we use as a benchmark or anything. However, if you look at what we're generating or projecting to generate from the ad valorem taxes for property values, we could drive the value of people's properties in a positive way so that it could balance out and remove the need to pull money from the utilities. And I think that's a goal. Why would you have a goal? Yes, you're moving a disincentive, but at the same time you're looking to have the benefit of your utility, and at the same time look at the controllable number that you have in here for our budget. And so I think that as one moves and the other hopefully improves, because more people should be thinking it's better to be here. Property values in this town, where we live and for everything that we have, is a great value. We all know that's a great value. And if one of these incentives now is getting reduced and we're still holding our own, I know more people are moving in. We should look to get some of those statistics of how many new folks. I know from the NAPC we have a lot of new folks moving into the city. And they have been just paid the true market value of whatever the market value is for their house. So that's, to me, a very positive thing, that it's very doable and reachable. I don't think at some point in time that statement of trying to have parity as a goal was just some kind of a political thing. It's not. You all can see that it's getting there, and we could use this extra funds, now you'll see in some of the line items, to do a little bit of the work in infrastructure.
Can I add just some
City Manager?
high voltage and charging electric comments? Because I love this subject. If another utility provider was in here doing what Lake Worth Electric was, is really the differential that we're talking about, because it would be franchise